Hello historians, and welcome to Purple Shirt History. Today, we'll talk about the Paper 1 Part A question. This is the easiest question in the entire IGCSE examination, and it's really critical you get full marks on it. You have to answer 3 sets of questions. Each one's 4 marks, so that's 12 marks total. It's really imperative that you get those 12 marks so you can get your A star. So let's take a look at the Part A question, and I hope you enjoy the video. So here we have a past paper and a Part A question that says, describe the restrictions imposed on German land forces by the Treaty of Versailles. So the first thing I like to do whenever I see a question is that I like to read it 2 or 3 times. So I read it just at a normal speed the first time, but the second time I like to go a bit slower and look for the keywords that have to be addressed in order to get the marks. So describe the restrictions imposed on German land forces by the Treaty of Versailles. So to me, the word restrictions is a keyword. German land forces is also a keyword, and the Treaty of Versailles is also a keyword. So I got restrictions here. I'm just going to do a little formatting, underline it, and that's what I want you to do when you take your real IGCSE exam or you have an assessment. Underline the keyword in the question. It'll really keep you guided. It will prevent you from straying off and just writing things that aren't related to the question. So here I go with those 3 underlines. So those are the 3 criteria that are needed to answer the question properly. So 4 marks, of course. So let's take a look at this Part A question. All of German colonies were controlled by the League of Nations, which effectively meant that France and Britain controlled them. Is that about land forces? Not quite. German colonies are very far away, not military aspects of, the Kaiserreich there. So I'm going to say that first sentence is not really addressing the question the way it needs to be. Going on, the Rhineland became a buffer zone. Is that about restricting Germany's military? I think so, right? So the Rhineland became a demilitarized zone. So that'll be in your textbooks. So that gets a mark for sure. Okay, the last 2 things we see there. Germany lost Danzig. Germany lost Memel. Okay, those are losses, but they're not losses of land forces. Those are territorial losses. So there's my handwriting. This is the premiere, the debut of my great handwriting. I'm sure you'll get used to it. I hope you can read what I write. It's always a challenge, even for myself. So looking at this particular answer, there's a lot of things that do not address the question. They may be factually correct, but not addressing the question, so they only get 1 mark. Okay, 1 out of 4. You really want to avoid that kind of result. Like I said, it's so critical to get full marks on this question. It really puts you in a good ways. So let me just put some key tips here in the title. So like I said, read the question 2 to 3 times. Right? If you just read it once and start answering, you can go flying off in some direction that won't really answer what's needed. So read it just normally the first time, and then read it slower the second time, and then underline those keywords, right? So that is something, even before you begin writing an answer, reading the question is absolutely so important to making a good response. You just need points and evidence for Part A. So the next video will be about Part B. You need a P.E.E.L paragraph structure, which we'll go over in detail. But for Part A, you just need points and evidence. Points like, the Rhineland became a buffer zone. It became a demilitarized zone. That's a point, all right? Evidence, if you were to say that the Rhineland became a demilitarized zone, so France had a buffer zone to prevent further German attacks, like came in 1914 and during the Franco-Prussian War. That can be good evidence, but just points and evidence for now. We'll talk about explanations later, which are not needed in a Part A question. Do not spend time explaining all of this stuff, it's not going to get you any marks. Points and evidence, very simple. Keep it simple, right? All right, let's look at the next example here. The Army was allowed to have only 100,000 men. 100,000 men, is that a military restriction to the land forces? Absolutely. Perfect answer, right? Very strong beginning. No conscription. Conscription was banned, okay? That means the government makes its citizens join the army, so to increase the size of the armed forces. So that was banned. Yes, that's a restriction. All right, looking, no armored vehicles. Excellent. That is a land restriction. But here's where we run into trouble. Submarines were not allowed. Oh, this was written, were allowed, which isn't true anyway. But that doesn't have anything to do with land forces. That's about the Navy. That's about sea power. So submarines and 6 battleships, these are both things that were relevant to the Treaty of Versailles, but it's not about land forces, so we can't give marks for those particular answers. So this one would get a 3. Good answer. All in all, it started very strong, but fell short of the full marks. All right. And let that particular example be a lesson to you. Give more than just 4 answers, 4 particular facts or 4 pieces of evidence, because some of them may be wrong. So say you give 6 pieces of evidence or, points and evidence together, and 2 of them are wrong, you're still going to get full marks. So please, this is a very important tip, give more than the minimum of 4 with points and evidence. So 5, 6, 7. Don't spend all your time on one part A giving 10 pieces of evidence, racking your brain for everything you can think. But the number I really like is 6. 5 is okay, but do not really put pressure on yourself to have every single answer correct by only giving 4 pieces of points and evidence, right? So try to make it 6. Point, evidence, point, evidence, point, evidence, something like that. Going back to this particular example, if in the answer they would have written for no armored vehicles and put in something like, I don't know, how about we say no tanks were allowed, right? So that would be a good evidence of no heavy vehicles, and that extra mark would have given full marks then, all right? No artillery pieces and stuff like that. So that, again, given that 6, even though those last 2 were wrong about submarines and battleships, that still would have got full marks. Back up to the tips portion of this note. Remember, it's positive marking. For those of you that are coming to Cambridge International exams from other systems, nothing will be taken away from you. You start with 0. You don't start with 100%. So even if you're not 100% sure your answer is correct or not, it won't hurt you to write it down. So there's no penalty for adding some information that's incorrect. It won't get you a mark, but nothing will be taken away from you. All right, here's the third and final part A for this particular question. All right, again, like the previous one, we see 100,000 troops. There you go. That is the best piece of evidence, I think, for this particular question. And then the evidence is it's hard to even maintain their own security, let alone attack anybody. So that's a good piece of evidence to say these are severe restrictions. There was a lot of chaos in post-war Germany because of the lack of control of the army, lack of numbers of the army. Again, conscription was banned. We described what conscription was. Soldiers should be only volunteers, so it's spelled out in this particular answer. Third, Germany was not allowed to have armored vehicles, okay? And the demilitarized zone of the Rhineland. So those are 4 correct answers. This is a full mark question, but again, it could have been improved with the armored vehicles, like we said in the previous one, tanks, armored personnel carriers, artillery pieces, these types of heavy things, right? Even if we were to add that volunteer part, we see this is a really great answer and worthy of full marks. So try to make your answers look like this. You don't have to number them firstly, secondly, thirdly, fourthly. If it helps you, do it, but it's not necessary. Just kind of make sure that you know you're giving enough answers to get the full marks. lastly, it has to be mentioned that in the real exam, you need to answer 2 questions from the core content and 1 from the depth study. So I'm writing this in all caps, which may annoy some people, but maybe this will stick in your mind. I know a few students over the years that have just done 3 core content questions, and that pretty much sacrifices 1/3 of all the available marks available for the paper 1. And sometimes people say, well, I made a mistake, now I have to take the test all over again and resit it. So please make sure that this is clear in your mind, 2 core content and 1 for the particular depth study you take. Thank you very much for watching this video. Please take a moment to like, comment, and subscribe for more content like this. Thank you very much, and see you in the next one.